There are moments in history when an entire nation suddenly realizes it has been living in a matrix. Not a technological matrix like in the movies, but a psychological one. The belief that they cannot do anything on their own. On September 30th, 2022, 20 million people of Burkina Faso awoke, and when a people awaken, nothing can stop them. In the presidential office in Ouagadougou, a 34-year-old man named Ibrahim Traoré put pen to paper on documents that would change not only the destiny of Burkina Faso, but of Africa as a whole. He did not yet know that those signatures would ignite a billion-dollar revolution, not in money, but in consciousness. The first ripples began spreading from the dusty farmlands of rural Burkina Faso, lands where, for centuries, people believed the soil could sustain them day by day, but never make them prosperous. Where they had grown accustomed to receiving food aid from abroad, believing it to be an immutable fate. But Ibrahim Traoré saw something different. He saw a people hypnotized by a narrative of their own helplessness. To understand why what is happening in Burkina Faso is so revolutionary, we must first understand the machine that has operated for decades to keep Africa in a state of dependency. This is not some secret conspiracy in the shadows, nor a hidden plot. It is a system that operates openly, justified by humanitarian reasons, and maintained by the very people who are said to be receiving help. The machine works like this. First, you convince a people that they cannot feed themselves. You show them statistics of poverty, technological backwardness, and underdevelopment. You paint a picture in which survival depends entirely on external aid. Then you provide that aid, but under the conditions you set. These conditions ensure they will always need your help. In Burkina Faso, this machine ran flawlessly for over 60 years. The country was known as one of the poorest in the world, dependent on international aid to maintain food security. Every year, millions of dollars in aid flowed in, but dependency only deepened. People gradually came to believe they could not produce enough food, could not develop their own economy, could not decide their own future. The collective mindset became, we cannot live without them. Government agencies absorbed this dependency mentality. Policies were crafted to suit donor requirements rather than people's needs. A self-fulfilling cycle formed. Believing in failure led to real failure. But there are moments in history when all these layers of deception are stripped away, when a nation sees the truth about its own strength. For Burkina Faso, that moment came when Ibrahim Traoré looked out the window of his presidential office and saw fields stretching to the horizon. He realized his country had 274,000 square kilometers of arable land, abundant groundwater, and 80% of its population engaged in agriculture with thousands of years of traditional knowledge. How could a country like that not feed itself? At the center of this awakening stood a man who had long understood that true power does not come from outside. Ibrahim Traoré was not just a leader. He was a philosopher of action, an architect of consciousness, a catalyst for transformation. To understand him, we must understand the philosophy he represents. His philosophy of self-reliance is rooted in a core belief. Every people already have within them everything necessary to prosper. This is not abstract theory, but a practical principle he applied in every policy. When international experts said Burkina Faso needed to import wheat to ensure food security, he responded by investing in the development of native grains such as millet, maize, and sorghum. He connected this philosophy to the legacy of Thomas Sankara and the ideals of African liberation, but adapted them to contemporary challenges. Sankara dreamed of a self-reliant Africa. Ibrahim Traoré sought to make that dream real in a globalized world. The mind of a revolutionary lies in seeing patterns others ignore. Traoré saw that every problem was connected. Poverty linked to dependency, dependency linked to loss of confidence linked to fear of innovation. He thought in terms of generations, not election cycles, and had the courage to confront entrenched power interests. His methodology was not only visionary, but systematic. Phase 1 was changing consciousness. He rewrote the national narrative about Burkina Faso's potential, tapping into cultural pride and historical memory, creating new symbols and language around capability. In his speeches, he did not talk about what Burkina Faso lacked, but about what it had. We have land, we have water, we have people, we have knowledge. So why do we think we are poor? These words spread across the country like seeds of a new awareness. Phase 2 was institutional transformation. He restructured the government to serve the people rather than donors, shifting priorities from dependency to self-reliance, and building partnerships based on equality. The Ministry of Agriculture was directed to focus on developing indigenous crop varieties instead of importing seeds. The Ministry of Education was tasked with integrating traditional agricultural knowledge into the curriculum. The Ministry of Finance was told to prioritize investments in projects that increased domestic production capacity. Phase 3 was economic revolution. Instead of focusing on consumption capacity, he focused on production capacity. Instead of exporting raw materials, he built local value chains to keep wealth circulating inside the country longer. When foreign companies wanted to mine gold and export it raw, he required them to process it locally, hire local labor, and transfer technology. When investors wanted to buy farmland to export produce, he required them to ensure food security for local communities first. Phase 4 was cultural revival. He revived traditional knowledge systems, blending ancient wisdom with modern techniques to create a new identity as producers and innovators. At national festivals, instead of praising foreign development models, he honored farmers who increased yields by combining traditional knowledge with new techniques. Instead of inviting foreign experts to speak, he invited village elders to share their farming experience. But philosophy means little without action. And Traoré's actions sparked a movement that shook not only Burkina Faso but all of Africa. A revolution is never about just one person. It's about the moment when one person's awareness becomes the awareness of many. In Burkina Faso, this spread happened with astonishing speed and scale. At first, people were skeptical. Self-reliance? They whispered. We've tried that before. But the first believers were farmers who saw what their land could produce when cared for properly. They began experimenting with traditional seeds, forming local cooperatives, and sharing knowledge organically. The turning point came when the first harvest under the self-reliance program exceeded expectations. Fields that once barely fed a family now produced surpluses for sale. Areas that used to import food were now self-sufficient. News spread from village to village. Skeptics became believers. When the majority began to embrace the vision, a wave of new energy swept the nation. In agriculture, farmers experimented with indigenous seeds, formed cooperatives, and built grassroots networks of knowledge sharing and innovation. In education, teachers introduced local knowledge into lessons, students developed pride in their culture and capabilities, and the curriculum focused on practical skills alongside cultural identity. The brain drain slowed as local opportunities grew. In the economy, entrepreneurs sought local solutions, investments shifted from foreign partnerships to local capacity, and new business models emerged based on locally generated value. Economic nationalism without xenophobia. This was not just a change of hearts and minds, it was a restructuring of systems. Government ministries were repurposed from aid coordination to production support. Budgets were reallocated from prestige projects to productive infrastructure. Success metrics shifted from donor satisfaction to self-reliance indicators. Decision-making prioritized long-term sustainability over short-term optics. Economic policies replaced imports with realistic timelines, supported local industries and value-added processing, redesigned finance to serve domestic production, and adopted trade policies that protected emerging industries. Cultural policies officially recognized traditional knowledge systems, integrated local languages into official communication, celebrated self-reliance and innovation in cultural events, and promoted positive African narratives in media. When Burkina Faso began showing results, its influence spread beyond borders. Revolutions do not respect boundaries. Traoré's ideas and Burkina Faso's successes began resonating across Africa and beyond. Farmers in Mali adopted the cooperative model. Ghana considered policies prioritizing local processing. Youth movements in Senegal talked about the Burkina Faso spirit as inspiration. Globally, development agencies were forced to rethink their approach. Academics studied the phenomenon. Media coverage shifted from skepticism to curiosity to admiration, and the Global South took notice of this alternative development path. Perhaps most importantly, Traoré contributed to an intellectual revolution, a new development theory based on endogenous capacity, challenging neo-colonial assumptions about Africa's potential, proving that modernization through self-reliance was possible. But the true measure of a revolution is the transformation it creates. Numbers and policies tell only part of the story. The real change happens in individuals, in how they think of themselves, relate to the world, and envision the future. The psychological shift was from dependency to agency. Before, we need someone to help us. After, we can solve this ourselves. From scarcity thinking to abundance thinking. Before, we don't have enough resources to do anything. After, we have everything we need, just need to organize it right. From individualism to collectivism. Before, I must look out for myself. After, we succeed or fail together. Farmers planted for communities, not just survival. Students dreamed of building Burkina Faso, not escaping it. Entrepreneurs built businesses owned and controlled by their communities. As individuals changed, so did society. Local businesses interconnected into production networks. Innovation clusters emerged spontaneously. Money stayed local longer, multiplying value creation. Communities strengthened. Intergenerational knowledge flowed. Women took leadership in new economic activities, and young people saw their future at home. Cultural revival brought prestige to local languages, validation and modernization of traditional techniques, and new songs, stories, and art celebrating self-reliance. Institutions became more accountable to citizens, education aligned with local needs, healthcare integrated traditional and modern medicine, and legal frameworks supported local enterprise and innovation. The result was a transformed nation. Food security shifted from import dependency to export capability. Jobs grew in production sectors. Trade balance improved through reduced imports and increased value-added exports. Financial independence reduced reliance on foreign aid and loans. By 2019, Burkina Faso imported 200,000 tons of rice. By 2024, it supplied 85% of its domestic rice needs and began exporting to neighbors, a symbol of a people reclaiming their dignity. Education produced culturally confident, skilled youth. Health outcomes improved. National unity strengthened. Migration patterns reversed as youth stayed and diaspora returned. Internationally, Burkina Faso gained regional leadership, global respect for its success and self-reliance, stronger negotiating power, and growing cultural and intellectual influence. Most importantly, it gave the next generation a different worldview. Children now grow up believing they can create anything. They know no limits imposed by the world on their parents. This revolution is not just for Burkina Faso. Ideas spread, especially when backed by tangible results. Across Africa and the Global South, leaders, activists, and communities are rethinking the dependency model. Ibrahim Traoré's legacy is not just in economic metrics or policies, but in a generation growing up with the belief that they can shape their own future. The revolution awaits, In every community with a problem its people can solve. In every individual with an idea the world calls unrealistic. In every nation that has accepted a smaller role than its real potential. Traoré has lit the flame. It now burns in Burkina Faso, and its sparks are flying across Africa and the world. The question is not whether the revolution will come. It is, are you ready to join? The revolution begins with a decision. A decision to stop accepting what is said to be unchangeable. A decision to believe in your own and your community's strength. A decision to act, even if that action seems small. From the fields of Burkina Faso, a message echoes across the world. Miracles don't wait for anyone. Miracles begin when we decide to create them. The future is not something that happens to us, it is something we create. Ibrahim Traoré and 20 million Burkinabe have proven it. Now, it's our turn.